Penguins, man?
Dude, I mean, second place in the Metro, sweep of the Northwest. This team, I know for a while they were like pushing towards the bottom with that losing streak, but ever since Christmas they have been nearly unstoppable.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. And like what gives me a lot of hope is the fact that, like, I know for a while a lot of the teams within the East were kind of crammed together in terms of like playoff positioning. But if you actually after we do this episode here, if you take a look, like, we have some space, dude. Like, we have some space in some games in hand, so we're looking pretty good.
Yeah, the Penguins are looking really good, and I'm kind of shocked that. Yeah, I was looking because I was like, oh, so we're in second place in Metro, we're 6 points back of the Hurricanes and 2 in front of the Islanders? Like, when did that happen?
Yeah, man. Oh, man. But at the end of the day, like, when it comes to, like, the Penguins, something I can tell you, friend to friend here, quiero saber si usted quiere los niños que yo.
Sorry, folks, you're not getting subtitles. You're not.
Welcome back, everybody, to the best music podcast on all sides of planet Earth. And the way that we measure that distinction is we go to Ukraine and we travel to Uganda, but we take the long way around. Ladies and gentlemen, this podcast is called Hey, Listen to This. And it is hosted by two dashingly good-looking men who share the same middle name. I'm the one. I am the only. I am the one who has come to the realization that he's never going to move to Canada despite his love of hockey, because over the past 48 hours he's just has had his fill of snow for a lifetime. Ryan James Kearns.
And I am the one, the only, I am right there with you. I am over the snow, over this winter, over the polar vortex, over all of this. Matthew James Durzik. And for those of you who don't know what we do here on Hey, Listen to This, every week me and Ryan pick a music album of choice, listen to it, and then we come together to talk about it. We go through the album track by track, line by line, note by note, pick out our favorite parts, pick out our least favorite parts if there are any in either category. Talk about what stood out, what could have been better, and at the end of the episode, we give the album a rating out of 10. We recommend an album based on the album we just talked about, and then the process begins anew. Such is the circle of life. So last week, Ryan, we talked about a band that would become a band, and that band was Kara's Flowers. And their debut album, their only album, entitled The Fourth World. And what was your thoughts on that album?
I was very happy about the concept of, like, reviewing a band prior to when they really just broke out and became, like, who they are. And not, like, in the sense of, like, reviewing, like Maroon 5's first album, because, like, that's when they broke out with their first album proper. Like, this was, like, their album prior to that with a different name. Because I know, like, oftentimes in our show, we kind of joke with, like, oh, hey, like, what do you think, like, Radiohead's, like, first name was before Radiohead? Well, we actually had the opportunity to, like, explore that kind of concept thanks to your ingenuity. So, yeah. And, yeah, that was just my overall thoughts and feelings. If, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to find out, like, my full flushed out feelings about said album, one, I encourage you to check out the album for yourself. And two, you know what to do. You're an educated person. You've come to this episode of Hey, Listen to This. So just go back one episode, click that link to play that episode, and make a Sunday out of it. So I'm gonna turn the table back over to you, Matthew. I know I had a good time, reviewing Kara's Flowers and exploring that album. How about you?
I had a good time reviewing that album too. Even the first time I had listened to that album in well over a decade, but I knew in the back of my mind it was one of those that always sort of lingered in my curiosity files. So I'm glad we talked about it. I'm glad we got to cover it. And again, if you want to hear my thoughts, they are on the same episode as the one with Ryan's thoughts, which are the last episode that we did. And that brings us to this episode. And we are going in a much different path this week, Mr. Kearns. What path is that?
We are going to go down to Puerto Rico and, talk about the one, the only, the Mr. Super Bowl halftime show performer this year. And that performer, in case you've lived under a rock, is indeed Mr. Bad Bunny himself. And the album that we're going to be specifically covering within his catalog is Un Verano Sin Ti, because last week's episode ended with Matthew picking that album between picking holidays of 4th of July and Valentine's Day. Well, for those of you who know what the album artwork of Un Verano Sin Ti, it's a sad heart. So that's what my clever thing was. So now, for those of you who are like, man, what is a Bad Bunny? Well, I kind of think that might be a loaded question, politically nowadays, because, a lot of people might have actually heard the Super Bowl halftime show announcement and actually had those exact words. So I'm going to do my best to just give, a brief overview of, who Bad Bunny is, what made him famous, and essentially his impact on the music scene and the album that we're specifically covering here today. So, Mr. Bad Bunny himself. Can you, Matthew, I'm gonna play a fun game with you. Can you I'm not gonna ask you to name take a guess at what Bad Bunny's stage name was before adapting the name Bad Bunny, because that's the only name he's ever had on the stage name persona. Can you guess, Bad Bunny's real name? Just take a random guess. Do you know this, though?
You mean to say that Bad Bunny's not his actual government name? That's interesting. Oh, boy. You know what? Just for the sake of not getting into any trouble, I'm not going to make a guess, because I feel like if I make a guess, it's just typical Spanish name. It's the first thing you think of. So, yeah, I'm going to abstain and just let you reveal this one.
Okay. Fair enough, dude. And also, shame on me for trying to put you on a potential, cancellation spot there.
I understand what you were going for, but I chickened out. That's on me.
It's all good. So, Bad Bunny's government name is actually Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio. So, and I actually had to look up the pronunciation of that last name, Ocasio, and then I'm like, oh wait, yeah, there's a famous politician in DC with that name within her, her name there. So anyway, for all intents and purposes, for the purposes of doing the overview, I'm just going to refer to Bad Bunny as Benito from here on out until we get to the actual review itself. So yeah, the way that he went from being a shy church choir boy to a global icon is basically the result of the fairy tale effect of living in the digital age of the year of our Lord, well, not the year of our Lord 2026, but modern day, the internet age, the streaming age, the SoundCloud age. So yeah, just honestly, just a few years before really blowing up and dominating the global charts, Benito was just a humble man, just balancing a communications degree with a job as a grocery bagger at a Econo supermarket. So, for the grocery baggers out there, you can listen to this and, feel inspiration. I invite you to. So, yeah. And he was spending his nights uploading raw Latin trap tracks to SoundCloud. You remember SoundCloud, man?
I do remember SoundCloud, and I remember when it used to be such a big deal. It isn't. That's not the case anymore.
Yeah, man, that's sad. That's sad. Anyways, so yeah, that's how, like, Benito was getting his start as a music artist. He was just independent artist loading music up to SoundCloud. So what really caught traction, what really caused him to break out was, like, a couple different things. Like, for one, you get that baritone delivery, and also, like, from what you kind of get with, like, international artists, you get that, like, kind of, like, quote-unquote compromise of, like, trying to sing a little bit in English just to draw in that English artist, like, English audience. Well, Benito basically refused to sing in English and just really trying to ground himself in that Latin, Spanish, Hispanic, like, roots. So, like, that really allowed him to catapult himself into, like, at least catching traction from, like, just being the SoundCloud artist to, like, being somebody who actually got a record deal. And also, a couple things on top of that, instead of, like, conforming to the traditional image of a reggaeton star, he kind of took that mantle of, like, the machismo culture of, like, what you would see in, like, reggaeton and, like, just, like, Hispanic Latin music as a whole, and tore it down from the inside. He often wore nail polish, skirts, while also using his platform to address social justice issues and the political struggles of Puerto Rico. So, like, he's not like other girls out there. He's a different kind of, like, a Latin reggaeton star. And what really leads us to that kind of, like, breakout to, Un Verano Sin Ti, like, by the time we were on the he was on the threshold of releasing this album, Benito had already achieved what most artists dream of in a lifetime. Throughout 2020, he released a trilogy of albums that were really prolific in his career. Before I continue in any part of this episode here, dear listener, we're gonna try our best to, like, pronounce any of the Hispanic elements within this review. So if we mispronounce anything, we're just two white dudes from Pittsburgh. We try our best, man. So these trilogy of albums that I'm referencing, like, the first one is YHLQMDLG. The next one is Las Que No Iban al Cielo, and the last one is El Ultimo Toro de Mundo. That one right there became the first all Spanish album to hit #1 on the Billboard 200. Like, this era, also within Benito's career, was defined by heavy and experimental fusion of rock and trap, and, like, this kind of left fans and critics wondering if Benito had reached his peak. And the marketing to his next project was marked with, like, intense anticipation, and the marketing itself the marketing campaign itself involved his famous Bugatti. It's kind of signaling a shift away from the dark, brooding energy of the pandemic era that Benito was doing with those 3 albums toward a more vibrant, expansive sound. That kind of brings us to Un Verano Sin Ti. I'm just going to do a brief overview of the album itself. A lot of people consider this album to be his proper breakout. Like, a lot of people call it, like, a masterpiece. It's described as a 23-track love letter to the Caribbean that effectively turned the world into a beach party. That's probably a nice thought, considering, like, what you and I are experiencing outside in, southwestern and northwestern Pennsylvania, so that's fun. And then, the album was released in May of 2022, And the album was a strategic playlist that masterfully blended reggaeton with mambo and indie pop. And it wasn't just a commercial juggernaut that stayed at number one for months. It was a cultural milestone that earned the first ever Album of the Year Grammy nomination for a Spanish language project. So yeah, that's basically kind of an overview of Benito himself, his impact on the scene as a whole, what made him famous, the album that we're talking about here today. And also one of the main reasons why we're talking about Bad Bunny as a whole is, he's performing the Super Bowl halftime show in a few weeks. So I figured it would be a worthwhile venture for us to dive into the artist and see if what our thoughts about him are. So before I give my back history on Mr. Bad Bunny himself, I'm going to flip it over to you, Matthew. What is your history with Bad Bunny as a whole?
To be completely honest, it's rather minimal. I went into this episode with the same questions that a lot of people had whenever that halftime show was announced, which is, who is this guy? Now, a lot of people are asking that for bad reasons, but I was asking that for a more realistic reason, which is I really did not know him or his music. I kind of knew who he was because I knew he had been mentioned in different lists as far as having albums of the year or songs of the year or being an artist of the year. I'd see his name on the charts. And I thought, okay, so you have this guy called Bad Bunny. I'm still not familiar with his music. And then in researching his back catalog, I saw the one song that I think a lot of people sort of recognize from him, which is the song I Like It, which was his first Hot 100 number one hit. But even then, it felt like he wasn't the main person to benefit from that song. I think the main thing people remember from that is the guest verse and appearance by Cardi B. And that was part of her upswing into the mainstream. So, yeah, I really have not gotten into Bad Bunny too much outside of the research for this episode. But that being said, I certainly was not against Bad Bunny. I certainly am willing to give him a chance on the main stage at the Super Bowl. And I listened to this album, and here we are.
Fair enough, man. Fair enough. And I don't really have an extensive history with Bad Bunny himself, even though I was one who brought him up for contention for the review here today. But the only thing that I can say to add a little bit more context for my own sake, Bad Bunny has always been a music artist that I've been kind of curious about, because I never really listened to him, but through my upbringing of discovering different kind of music, thanks to my favorite music reviewer Anthony Fantano, he's given a couple of Bad Bunny albums decent scores. It's specifically the one that we're talking about here today. And I remember listening to the one that we're talking about here today when it first came out, and I was just like, okay, cool. Just moved on. And then last year, when he came out with his Debir Tirar Más Fotos, I listened to that and I'm like, okay, cool, and just moved on. I was just like, this is clearly not for me. I can dig what's going on here, but it's not for me. And personally, when it comes to foreign language kind of music as a whole, outside of maybe Cigarros and a handful of K-pop tracks, I'm not really much one for really kind of diving outside of the English language, but that never really deters me away from appreciating art and music as a whole. One can make the argument that when I'm listening to heavy metal and screaming music, that dude, you're not even understanding what language that they're talking about in the first place. So what does it matter? I'm like, oh, that's a fair point. So yeah, that's basically my thoughts and feelings. Not my thoughts and feelings, but more of my relationship with Bad Bunny as a whole, man.
I'm glad you shared that. And to be honest with you, I'm kind of in the same boat with you when it comes to foreign language albums. I am not against them on principle. I am willing to give them a shot. But I do not necessarily gravitate towards them just out of personal preference. That being said, this is not the first time we've done a foreign language album on this show. Well over a year ago, almost two, I want to say, we covered the album Pink Tape by FX in our K-pop episode, our second K-pop episode. So that was, and I enjoyed that album. I enjoyed the living hell out of that album. So, again, I am not opposed to discussing this, and for it being the time that it is, heading into the Super Bowl in a couple weeks, because now we know that it's going to be Patriots versus Seahawks in the Super Bowl. Yay, woo. We can sit here and talk about the halftime entertainment, because I'm sure there are 30 other fan bases that may tune in just for that if they so choose. So I feel it isn't our duty to give them a little preview, Ryan. I'm glad you decided to go this route. And without any further ado, I'm going to volley it over to you for track one off of Un Verano Sin Ti, and that is Moscow Mule.
So with Moscow Mule here, one thing I want to set the record straight before we dive into a lot of this review here as a whole. Like typically with hey, listen to this. We dive into lyrics. We say, hey, these are our lyrical highlights, and we talked about song messaging. We're not gonna be able to do that here because while we can maybe kind of go through the English translation of everything, we want to I don't want to speak for you 100%, but at least for me, I want to kind of go at this as a lens of here right now, how am I gonna enjoy this? Are you coming at it through the same lens?
It for the most part, I there are some lyrical analyses I have, but for the most part, I'm in the same boat you are.
All right, cool. Well, it'll be interesting to see how we both approach this review. But my take on Moscow Mule here, it's a very good starter track for the whole album, because we kind of get hey, this is if you want to dive into this album, this is the palette that you're gonna need. And right out of the gate, I want to focus in on Bad Bunny's flow here, because I feel it's very solid. And it kind of reminds me, for better for worse, because these two artists they're not everyone's cup of tea, but it kind of reminds me of a Post Malone Drake kind of flow, in terms of just rhythm and everything like that. Sound wise, maybe not so much, because I know Bunny's flow is a lot deeper than Drake's, but I digress. But yeah, I do like what's going on here, and the main hook of Moscow Mule is pretty solid. I thought it was pretty effective, and overall, one of the things that I noticed, and we're gonna come across this kind of beat throughout the rest of this album here. When this song grooves, that reggaeton beat there, it grooves pretty effectively. And we get a musical Ryan Kern's Kink here, where you get a section where the track skips for a second, and I'm oh my god, thank you. That speaks to my people out there. And I also found the spacey outro with Moscow Mule to be pretty dope. I liked what was going on here. So yeah, overall though, with Moscow Mule here, I did appreciate what was going on as a complete package. Not so much that this is a top 3 track by any imagination. However, I would put, within the context of this album here, in terms of track rankings, I would put this in the top half of the album. And in terms of a rundown for me, in terms of bottom and top tracks, I have a top 3 and just a bottom 1.
Noted. First of all, I am very glad that you were able to pull the Drake comparison. I was going to do that if you weren't going to. The other artist I had listed in the same description is The Weeknd. I feel this is kind of a sort of note in that sort of dark, or at least early The Weeknd, maybe not so much the experimental radio stuff, but early The Weeknd, 50 Shades of Grey Weeknd. That's kind of what this feels like. Very... I call it dark R&B vibe. And you're right on the money. This is very much a blueprint for the album. Musically, it has that reggaeton beat that as that drum of dun 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 dun, or something similar to that. I may have botched that. I apologize to drummers everywhere. And I agree that Bad Bunny's flow is solid, and I would say it is better than Drake's. It really didn't elevate itself a whole lot for me compared to other tracks that we're going to get to. And I would say this is also a very interesting litmus test for those who may be a little afraid of the song's Spanish content, because there were a lot of songs, if not the majority of them, I did look up the English translation for. Because funny enough, not only do the videos for the songs on YouTube have mostly English translations, but so does Genius.com. And I am here to tell you that this song is less offensive in Spanish, because this song, lyrically speaking, is, I mean, it's kind of what you expect from a R&B Lothario type, a very, like you said, machismo type, which is basically, hey, let's open a bottle of alcohol and let's have sex. And yeah, he says it very, very explicitly. It just doesn't sound as explicit in a foreign language. So again, this is an interesting litmus test from that perspective. But I was not offended by it. It is what it is. There have been plenty of R&B songs in many languages about it, so party on. And like you, I would probably put this in the top half of the album. Maybe not quite like in the top, like super upper echelon, but probably upper middle, sort of in that range. And for full disclosure, I have the full gamut for this episode. I have a top 3 and a bottom 3.
It's gonna be interesting to see like how our opinions separate, because like I kind of hinted at the discussion with Moscow Mule. Like, I really didn't look up the English translations, but the way that you listen to this album is you watch a good bit of the YouTube videos, and they have the English translation. So it's gonna be a good contextual review, because we're coming at it from two different kind of standpoints. But yeah, and I'm also kind of glad that for the most part, in our overall appreciation about the track, we're kind of coming at it from the same kind of standpoint. That being said, though, I feel like it's time to switch on into what I would consider to be probably the big single off of the record here, with the next track being Después de la Playa.
Yes, Después de la Playa. And this track pretty much starts off where Moscow Mule ends, both thematically and musically. Fun fact, the first time I listened to this album, or what I thought I listened to this album, was on a full album stream, because those are on YouTube, where you can just listen to the whole album in one video. But they had this song, I'm assuming for copyright reasons, placed dead last. So hearing this song come second, I was like, oh, okay, so that's where this song goes. But that being aside, it picks up where Moscow Mule left off. It has the same reggaeton beat, a little bit more of a deeper synth involved. And you have Bad Bunny talking about him wanting to fornicate with a significant other and equating it to surfboarding. Because again, I did look up the translation. That's what it is. He's basically referring to, wanting to go surfing because, you are wet like the ocean. And it starts sort of, okay, more R&B sex stuff. All right, fine. And then it just kind of abandons it in the middle. And then he basically just says, hey, when we're going to go dancing? And just rips into this full-on traditional, crazy Latin horn-based beat. And I was just like, oh, okay. So we're just going to party here. I like this. I like this a lot. Because you and me both, we grew up band kids, so anytime horns are involved, it's a good thing. And these horns sound crisp. The beat is very lively. The lyrics don't change that much. He's still very much talking about equating his body or her body to a surfboard and wanting to go on said surfboard. But at the same time, the fact that they just switch it up with that, it kind of makes the humor of these lyrics, because they are funny. They're not necessarily very romantic or very smart, but they're funny because they're not smart. And so you kind of realize he's going for the, sort of the, hey, baby, what's going on here type of vibe. And it works. It all just very much works. The horns sound great. The back 2/3 of this song sound great. And it's meant to be fun, and it succeeds. So, without any further ado, this is in my top 3, and it lands at number 3.
And for me, a lot of the things that you mentioned about the track, I echo for one reason or another. For one, I'm going to talk about that change up that occurs around the 1 minute mark, the one that you kind of alluded to, where he just abandons everything. That change up is so fucking good. The way that because you talked about how the track basically kind of picks up where Moscow Mule ended up, where you get those spacesuit warbly beats and Bunny's rapping on top of everything. And it's very much a continuation of the thought train there. But you also within those beats, I do appreciate what was going on in terms of Bunny and the beat at certain spots. You get some fun interplay. But around the 1 minute mark, the switch up that you and I both have illustrated, he literally taps the microphone and he just rambles on something. He says, "Oh, Zumba." And then everything just fucking breaks out. It's just so fucking good. And you talk about the sax and horns, everything sounding crisp. That feature that happens at the halfway point, I'm always a fan of a good sax and horn feature. So that was executed pretty well. And also, yeah, you can just feel the energy throughout the whole song, and it's so nice. It's so fun. And through my constant replays of the track itself, it was constantly always a highlight for me. And also, when the track ends, you get a nice fun spoken word outro. And I don't know if this is a studio moment or just a basically kind of trying to be an organic moment, oh hey, blah 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 blah, I don't know what I can compare it to 100% within the context of reviews that we've done, but the outro is there for people to check out. So yeah, the only thing I gotta say about Después de la Playa is, you, this track did land in my top 3. But unlike you, it's not my 3rd favorite track. It's my top track off the whole album.
Very respectable. I completely respect that. And Catch Me on Another Day, this probably is either not quite my... I mean, there are a couple other tracks that definitely are in that same category, and they are obviously higher in my top 3. But Catch Me on a Different Day, I could probably shuffle the top 3 around a little bit and put this at number 1, but... Again, it would depend on the day. But yeah, no, this track slaps, and it is very, very good, and definitely a highlight off the album, as it turns out, for both of us. So, shifting gears, I will throw it to you, Ryan, for track 3, which is Mi Porto Bonito.
Mi Porto Bonito. So the collab artist here with Mi Porto Bonito is Cinco Colon. Again, I know I'm probably mispronouncing that. That's fine. I'm just a humble man. But for the intents and purposes of my track dissection, I'm just going to refer to this person as Cinco. So, yeah, here, Cinco's verse starts out pretty standard. It sounds fine, but, in terms of what we've experienced so far with Moscow Mule and the first part of the previous track here, it kind of seems like a home base for this album. But it's not a bad home base to exist in, but it's basically this is first gear for it. And also speaking about home home base and first gear, the production here, there's nothing really to say that stands out throughout this track. It's not bad by any means, but this is basically, again, kind of home basey, kind of production elements here. Nothing really stands out. I will say the only things that do kind of give this track quote unquote breathing room is, I know there's nothing really that stands out, but you do get some brief moments where things change up, whether that's through a pause or just a brief moment of a beat change. So there was that I found enjoyable in the track. And Bunny himself, he sounds pretty solid throughout the track, and you get moments where you can just really tell that his emotion is changing. And that's one thing as a whole with Bad Bunny. Like, I really did appreciate, even though like I didn't look at the lyrical context whatsoever, like you can really tell like he's a man who emotes pretty well. So yeah, overall though with me, Porto Bonito, I would honestly kind of put this in the bottom half of my appreciation of like of the tracks here. Not so much like it's my bottom track whatsoever, but it's definitely like not so much. It's not good enough to be like a middle of the track rankings, but like it just seems like there's not really a lot here for me to sink my teeth into, but nothing like horribly offensive that this is a bottom track, man.
First of all, I will start by uttering 8 words verbatim that are in my notes that I wrote variations of throughout the entirety of my notes. And this is the first track it applies to because it's so early on. Those 8 words are bring back the beat, bring back the horny. And that's what this song does. Because once again, we get the traditional reggaeton beat. And once again, we have Bad Bunny trying to hit on women for the sake of sexual intercourse. And I will agree with you that the beat is fine and the production is solid. It is home basey and it very much does sort of steer itself into album track territory with that. I do give Bad Bunny credit though, because he does sound like Lothario. He understood the assignment of what this track is. Unfortunately, Chencho Corleone, I believe, did not do that at all. Or at the very least, if he did, it sounds terrible. I don't know why his voice sounds like that, but it sounds very nasally. And the fact that they decided to double track and harmonize it makes it worse. So I disagree with you on that part. I did not like the guest appearance at all. So much to the point where on the second or third go around, I was like, no, we can't do this. We cannot do this. This guy sounds like a dweeb. And again, if it weren't for Bad Bunny sounding like his normal self, this track probably would have sunk all the way to the bottom. But it is reprieved enough that it is only my second least favorite track off of Un Verano Sin Ti.
All because of the one guy sound like a dweeb, man. Well, not just because of that, but like I appreciate that analysis, man.
Well, it's not just the fact that he sounds like it's half him, half the production. I don't know if they toned his vocals up or just made him sound very like distinctive. Whatever it was, it just didn't work for me. Simple as that.
And that's fair enough. And one thing that I'm just gonna, articulate before we kick it on into the next track here, that reggaeton beat is something that it got repeated so much throughout like the record that I had to look up why does reggaeton music have the same beat throughout like a lot of its music. And the answer that I basically kind of came across is like it's basically the equivalent of like listening to like screamo music and they're not being like they're being screaming in the music. Like it's just part of it. Like it's just like it's meant to be like very danceable, very recognizable, just very easygoing. So there's like several instances throughout the record here that Bunny kind of like plays with that beat concept as a whole. But yeah, I had to take a step back as a novice to like reggaeton music as a whole to like actually do some research, and it kind of made me dial back on some of the criticisms I had on the record. But for the purposes of progressing through said review here, man, we must trudge on to the next track here, and that next track is Tití Me Preguntó. Hey Matthew, the floor is yours. What question do you have about this track?
Very nice, very nice. So Tití Me Preguntó. Once again, we bring back the beat, but this time we establish a more complex ideology compared to the first 3 tracks, because is Bad Bunny still kind of on the pent-up, I want to have sex side? Yeah, a little bit. But this time it feels like things are a little different. Like, he's being a bit more reflective of who he is. And once again, I did dive into the English translation lyrics. First of all, before I get into those, the beat does sound fine, and Bad Bunny himself definitely sounds fine. He's going for more of a hip hop type of vibe with this track. Like, there's not a whole lot of instruments or synth. It's just basically percussion and his vocals, and it sounds pretty good. But then you get to the lyrics, which on the hook, and I'll do the English translation, go, in a VIP, hey, say hello to Auntie, let's take a selfie, say cheese, let those who have already forgotten about me smile. And I was like, whoa, okay, hold on. That's deep. That's a lot deeper than I was expecting. So, it kind of does remind me of, or at least what Drake wants to try to purvey, which is sort of this self-awareness that maybe he's the bad guy, or maybe all this quest for quickies and one-night stands is not necessarily fulfilling, or that perhaps that world and the world he wants to be in is clashing a little bit. And I will say the music video clarifies that a little bit more, because at the start of the video, he's just, going up in the club, having a good time. But at the end of the video, he is in a wedding, and he's getting married. So perhaps the tone of this song, as you said, a little bit in Porto Bonito, is that he's shifting from being the sex-crazed Lothario into something that wants to, somebody who wants to settle down and take things easy. So I thought that was pretty neat, and I thought that this was a nice transition piece in that regard. It's not my top three, just because it still sounds, like you say, very home basey. But I would probably put it towards the upper middle or the upper part of the album, because Bad Bunny sounds really good, the beat's solid, and it does progress things from a psychological perspective.
I think I'm going to disagree with you on a couple of different elements here, but for the positive, man. So I don't feel like this track here is home basey by any means. Like, one of the things I noticed coming right out of the gate, you talk about Bad Bunny incorporating hip hop elements, trying to go for more hip hop flair here, and I absolutely agree with you here, but I was immediately hooked in, where the whole start of the track just feels very snarky, through Bunny's vocals and his rapping, you can literally hear moments where he is smirking. And I absolutely did appreciate that. So, and the beat was not the traditional reggaeton beat, which I did appreciate. I don't even think there was a reggaeton beat here whatsoever, if I'm not mistaken. I could be mistaken, but I digress. Outside of that intro, the tempo change was effective in this track, and it hooked me in. And also you get the rising and falling effect around the halfway point. I felt like that was pretty solid with the way that Bunny was playing with that. And also the mood shift around the halfway mark was pretty solid. And also, as a whole, I love the bass and spacey effects that you found in the background after that sonic shift in the track. And also the inclusion of the voicemail sections throughout the whole track, I found that to be very effective. Again, I don't know the exact context. You kind of provided a little context within your analysis of the track, so thank you for that. But I thought that to be very effective, and this was another track for me that throughout repeated listens of the album, I kept going back to, and I was like, yeah, man, I could really dig what's going on here. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, do you hear that sound? That is the sound of the microwave going off, because we have arrived at my third favorite track off the whole record.
Very, very nice. Honestly, yeah, again, this couldn't quite make the top three for me, because I like the other three tracks a lot better, but this is definitely a top half track, because again, I agree with you. Whatever's on it does work. Because again, I think it becomes more complex. I think the beat's real nice. I think Bad Bunny himself sounds very good. I could even probably consider this maybe like another a 4 or a 5. Like that's the territory I'll probably put this in, but not quite top 3 for me. But I completely respect you putting it in yours because it's a very good track.
Thank you, man. And I'm curious to see what your top 3 is and like what my overall thoughts of it, because like I feel like I don't know. It's just gonna be interesting to see like how we both like handle like this review as a whole. But for the sake of like progressing said review, the next track here is Un Ratito. And here with Un Ratito, like one of the things I noticed right out of the gate is the performance from Bunny himself. Like like I talked about earlier in the album, like he has the ability to like really emote and wear his emotions on his sleeve, his voice, and he does that pretty well here. And on the production elements here, I do enjoy it as a whole. And like one thing that I really did enjoy, like we've got like party tracks previously in the album here, but here it seems like they're kind of going for a solitude feel. But what kind of holds a track back from being like a top track or even like a cut track, which for contextual sake that just means like it just missed out on being a top 3, is you get that home base like reggaeton salsa beat, and like that's fine as a whole concept, but it just seems like we have two worlds clashing, but they don't mesh well together. And that might have been like the whole like like artistic vision of the track as a whole. Who's to say? The outro here, though, is pretty solid. You get the gradual fade out of like Bunny's vocals, and you get like synths playing some lines. So yeah, overall though, with Un Ratito, like I would consider this to be like one of the first like middle of the road tracks within the album. Like it has like a lot of potential, but like there were some elements that were poorly executed in my opinion.
I kind of disagree. I'm probably a slight hair higher on this track than you are. Not to the point where I would put it in my top 3 or maybe even the top half of the album, but it's solid because I kind of understand what you're saying with the mix of the slow vibes, the slow synth vibes mixed with the sort of slowed down reggaeton beat not meshing. I thought it meshed fine. Like it didn't stand out to me to the point where I was like, oh, that's great. I was like, oh no, this is a slower version of what we've already heard musically speaking, and I thought it sounded okay. As far as the rest of the song though, lyrically, we're not quite bringing back the beat, or we are in a slower way. We're definitely bringing back the horny, though, and here he is being very self-aware about it. He's basically admitting that he is constantly wanting sex, and on the one hand, yeah, it feels great. On the other hand, is this really going to help him find true love? And he's basically admitting, hey, this might get in the way of trying to get there. So once again, we take another step towards self-realization, which I did appreciate. But overall, yeah, this track wasn't a super standout track for me. It was fine. It definitely progressed the story, but didn't necessarily progress my interests, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, totally, man. And also, like, I think the overall concept of what Bunny was going for here, if I'm not mistaken, is like attending the ultimate party, but realizing at the end of the day you don't really have anyone to go home to. So I think that might have been the effect here, and I think like through your lyrical analysis that's what we're getting here. So yeah, overall like a pretty good concept, and not a bad execution here so far. So that being said, the next track, Matthew, is not Yo Soy Clasio, it is Yo No Soy Clasio, and you're up, man.
I am up. So for this track, we get, again, I don't think this album was trying to follow directly the 5 stages of grief, or if they were trying to draw like a pentagram and somehow ended up with a spirograph. But all that to say is that if the last track was in the category of bargaining, here we get acceptance. Here we get admittance of guilt. Because Here, he is owning up to the fact that he is the bad guy. He is owning up to the fact that he is the monster in whatever path he creates. He is the bad bunny. He is very much the bad bunny, and nothing's going to get in his way, and he realizes that he's not the good guy, and he's okay with that. And the fact that he's admitting it does help, because these are some pretty gnarly lyrics. And what makes it interesting is that these very sort of screw you, screw me type of lyrics have a really fascinating clash with the tone of the song, which is very much acoustic guitar on the beach and a much more relaxed samba beat, which to me, that's just funny. Like, that's just a really interesting, funny way of just being like, hey, let's make this nice, soft jazz type of vibe while I tell you just how awful everyone and everything is, including myself. And lyrically, I do have to give him the credit for taking a shot at the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, granted, this was from 2022. They would win a title 3 years later. But it was funny because they broke up that big team of Kevin Durant, James Harden, Serge Ibaka, etc. So, yeah, that was kind of funny. But this is another song that came very close to being in my top 3. Not just because it had that clash, but it also had a really nice piano solo at the end. I was just like, oh, I was not expecting a piano solo. I like piano solos. Very cool. So, yeah, this is probably another track, much like Pregunto or Tití Me Preguntó, where probably in the 4, 5, 6 category, like just outside the top 3 for me. This track is pretty good.
And I would agree with you. Like, the overall switch up in production here, like, for me, it was very much needed. Like, we needed like a different kind of flavor here. Like, I know we got that with Después La Playa, but like here, like you get a tonal switch up, and it was a very effective. Like the samba salsa groove that you get here for me, like I found that to be refreshing as well. And also, something that you didn't talk about in your dissection is we got whistling here, man. Whistling. I dig it, man. Like, that was fun, and it was fun, man. And Bunny here, he grows here pretty well, pretty solid, and the whole track as a complete package is just a good vibe with some good whistling. You get that piano solo, and like, at the halfway mark, you get a change up in the production for a second. Like, it gets a little more introverted and, like, focuses on the solitude aspect of it. And then you kick back into the main groove of the song. So, like, I thought that was effective and solid as well. So, yeah, with this track here, I feel like you might be a little higher on this track than me as a whole. Because, like, I want to consider this to be, like, a cut track. I would consider this to be, like, top half. Like, maybe like a 6 or a 7, like, within that range. But it's a fun track nonetheless.
It is a very fun track. And again, this is, maybe it was a little too smarmy for me to really, like, accept it for what it was. And again, the laid backness of it, almost wants you to pull back and just, like, not really focus on what's going on. And the thing is, what's going on is very interesting and bizarre. So, again, that clash is very much appreciated, but I just didn't quite appreciate enough to put it any higher than some of the other tracks. But I would say this is, again, a top half at the very least for me with this track. So, I will throw it back to you, Ryan, for the next track off of Un Verano Sin Ti, and that is Tarot.
So with Tarot here, we get another collaborator, guest first kind of person here, and this person is Jaco, and I might be mispronouncing that, but I try, man. So Jaco, with their input of the track here, like, they do a solid verse. Nothing that really adds to the overall package of the track, but nothing that really takes away from it. It doesn't derail it like another track that when we'll talk about it. But the track here starts pretty decent, with that spacey production and Jocko doing their verse. And also that reggaeton beat gets blended into the production. It's not bad. It's pretty effective, and I do like them playing with the beat as a whole. And also between Jocko and Bunny, you get plenty enough emotion from both of them that makes it an enjoyable track. And the song does groove pretty well. Even though at this point in the review, I was starting to get some reggaeton beat fatigue, because yeah, it gets repetitive, and if you were just to pick out the song on a playlist and just play it by itself, it's fine. But that home base beat does get morphed into a much more bouncy beat, so I did appreciate that. And as a whole, you get enough switch ups here within the track to keep everything fresh. But yeah, overall though, with Tarot here, this is another middle of the road track. There's some solid performances, a lot of decent stuff happening here, but it seems like we're kind of running it back, and running it back within the context of this album here is not necessarily a bad thing if you want to go individual tracks, but as an album package, it does wear on the listener a little bit if you're not familiar with the genre.
Yeah, that's fair. Or I mean, again, it may depend on your tolerance for the beat, because I'll explain why that may not be such a bad thing. But for me though, this track, I do agree with you that not only is it setting in the reggaeton fatigue, but there's not a whole lot in this track that stands out musically to me. You know what you're expecting, and it doesn't even sound necessarily spectacular in certain ways. And my first note on here is bring back the beat, bring back the horny, and bring back the inferior guest vocals. Because I did not appreciate the guest vocalists here as much as you did. I didn't think they were quite as bad as the guy from earlier, but I just thought that it didn't really mesh at all. And what really set this song back for me were the lyrics, which again, if you're not paying attention, if I just rated this in Spanish, I probably would have given this track a pass and maybe not have put it down where I'm going to, because, spoiler alert, I do have this in my bottom 3. But there are some lyrics here where it's okay, we get that you want to get to know this woman biblically, but you don't have to spell it out certain ways. The line that pretty much pinned it down for me was, translated to English, I want to know which panties you wear to sleep. Dude, come on. Don't. That doesn't need to be put on the public record, man. You don't have to do that. So yeah, to me, when you can put it all together, this just feels like a step back from the progression of introspection that we got in the last few. The vocals aren't great, although Bad Bunnies are fine. The beat's fine too, but it's not necessarily a standout thing. And overall, that creates a package, which puts Tarot as my third least favorite track off the whole album.
That's fine, man. And I think through your lyrical dissection, I might actually alter my overall score of the album, but I'll see how it feels, everything kind of plays out. But yeah, it's funny how you illustrated. Hey, it's fine if you weren't paying attention to the lyrics, but you were paying attention to the lyrics, and it did sink the track into a bottom territory for you. So perfectly fine, and I totally respect your opinion, especially about that one line. Man, that's gross. Anyways, I digress. Matthew, the next track is Neverita, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, good sir. Neverita, and instead of bringing back the beat, we're bringing back the 2010s, and we're also bringing back the horny. But I will start with the 2010s part, where it just feels like this song, production-wise, It sort of goes away from reggaeton and goes for a more traditional like American R&B mix of club beat and then trap beat, and it switches between the two time and time again. And for whatever reason, maybe it was based on the fatigue I got from the last track, but this felt like a breath of fresh air a little bit. Like it felt like, oh, this is a club jam that I might have listened to back in my days of clubbing in Chester, West Virginia. Don't ask. And going to hit the dance floor and hearing a beat just like this, and the video, if you haven't checked it out, very much verifies that because it's shot almost like a goofy green screen late 90s, early 2000s music video that was made on a very tight budget. And I did appreciate that too, because that just sort of, it almost plays into the throwback nature of what they were trying to go for. And musically, I think Bad Bunny sounds quite good on here. Lyrically, they are what they are. He is who he is. He wants some. Do you have some? Thank you, sir. May I have another? It's very much what it is. So it didn't quite creep up into the top 3, but I'd say this is probably like 6, 7, 8 range. Like this is probably close to the top half of the album because I did dig those beats quite a bit.
And that's fair. And for me, like, you were kind of right on the money when you talked about this being like 2010s, like club kind of music. And that's the best thing I can say about this track as a whole. And like before I progress, like this isn't my bottom track by any means. So okay. Before we start to get into slight Flight O'Clock City here, but yeah, like the overall package of this track, like you get that smooth beat that we kind of talked about. You get that flow from Bad Bunny, so like that's good. And you also get a nice vocal effect where you get a distorted echo of Bunny's voice throughout the track. And I found that to be pretty entertaining, pretty solid. And you get a decent section of a halftime groove, I think about halfway through the track. But yeah, like the honest feelings I have about this track, Neverita, it's an album track through and through. There's not much other than what I've already talked about that made me appreciate the track. And I'm probably gonna forget about the track in T minus 2 days. So, oh man, shout out to Jeremy Johns, he's the real one out there. But anyways, with Neverita, I'm gonna put this in the bottom half of the track rankings here. Probably within the 20 range, not 20 because there's 23 tracks and this is bottom 3. I would put 17, 18, 19, around that kind of range, man.
And that's fair because again, I was just captivated by it. Maybe again I was reacting a little hard to the fatigue, but no, this track I would probably go back to a little bit more than a certain few amount of the tracks that we'll get into because I just thought, again, maybe I'm a little bit more softer towards the early 2010s than somewhere, and I was not very kind to that kind of club music to certain degrees when it first came out. But that's another conversation for another day. We will continue on with this conversation, and Ryan, I will throw it to you for the next track, which is La Corriente.
La Corriente, man. And also with La Corriente, we get another collab track here, and the collab artist here is Tony Diaz. And Tony Diaz, their performance was pretty solid, and I actually found Bunny's performance as well pretty solid. And one highlight that I did have on this track here is the parts where they're rapping together. I felt like that came across pretty nicely. You get the reggaeton beat coming back here, but it comes through in a couple different styles, so enough variation to keep the overall track being fresh and pretty solid. And only other thing I gotta say about La Corriente is the production here just seems more intense and angry with gnarly synth parts. So I found that to be a nice change of pace, pretty refreshing. But overall though, with La Corriente, it's gonna fall. I want to say a lot of the tracks that I've been putting into the mid range of the album ranking here. Like, I'm gonna just replace that with the quote unquote good song bucket. So if we can bring back that trope for this episode here. So yeah, it's a fine track. There's some good performances here, and like enough stuff to keep a lot of things fresh, man.
My thoughts on La Corriente. Once again, we bring back the beat and we bring back the. I don't know. So I would say this, to me, this track falls a little closer to album track territory for me. It's not bad by any means. It's not a bottom track for me, but it's very much another track for me. Because lyrically, it just feels like it's another mix of slight storytelling, but mostly the will we, won't we dynamics of Bad Bunny trying to hook up with somebody. And what really, I think, puts us into album track territory is the fact that the most distinguishable part of this song and the highlight of this song for me, it's what's not distinguishable, because Tony Dice is barely distinguishable soundly and sonically from Bad Bunny himself. And because of that, he immediately leaps to the front of the pack in guest vocalists so far. Like, the fact that I could not tell when either of them were going was like, okay, at least he sounds like Bad Bunny. At least he's trying to flow like Bad Bunny. At least they're working together correctly. At least, their voice isn't, toned up so high that it makes me feel like I'm listening to Alvin and the Chipmunks. Like, this is solid. So, yeah. And the fact that the indistinguishableness is the most distinguished part of the song, I was just like, yeah, that's not a great sign. But that being said, I thought overall this song was solid, and if I was listening to this album front to back again, I probably wouldn't skip this. It's all right.
Fair enough, man. And also the comparison to Alvin and the Chipmunks kind of made me chuckle there. So, yeah. And I feel like with this record here, we're kind of getting into a groove of a lot of the songs kind of are, bringing back that mantra, bringing back the beat, bringing back the horny. Like, it's almost like I want to draw a comparison to like the Wiz Khalifa episode that we did, where like a lot of the stuff was basically that. So, not bringing back the beat, bringing back the horny, but like, a lot of it was repetitious. But I digress. We must progress instead of regressing here. And the way that we progress, Matthew, is we get into the next track, and it is effectively called Efecto.
It is Efecto indeed. And they tried to hide the beat, but they brought it back anyway. You can't hide it from me. I could hear that little slow reggaeton beat in the very back there. Although the production choices on this track are distinguishable, and they do stick out. Because here we have Bad Bunny equating his quest for sex and quest for lust with drugs. And here it actually kind of takes a very direct synthesis between the two. When I say direct synthesis, I mean between the lyrics and the music. Because first of all, I thought Bad Bunny's vocals on here were quite good. It had a very nice flow. There is a little bit of reverb on that, but that's not necessarily a bad thing at all. And yeah, the fact that he is talking about getting high and wanting to have sex, and he's basically equating, this moment of being high to, some sort of pinnacle. There is a element to this song that feels very honest, even though a lot of it does feel unpleasant. Like this kind of reminded me almost of some of the stuff off of There's a Riot Going On by Sly and the Family Stone, where it's so drenched in reverb and drug references that you just kind of wonder if you're trying to be like sonically taken into this world that is like a smoky room filled with needles. And again, it sounds like it works. Did I put it in my top 3? I did not, because this track was a little too... it's definitely not samey sounding. It's definitely not boilerplate, but it didn't stand out quite enough for me. I'd probably put this towards like the dead middle, where it's a little too uninteresting to place in the top half, but not like too boilerplate to put in the bottom half. Like it's right around the middle for me with Efecto. And I did appreciate I called it anti-outro to this track, where it just sort of like delves into just some sort of like weird synth and just sort of peters out at the end. So yeah, like this is a very trippy track, and it's not the last one we'll cover.
Yeah, yeah. And I did enjoy the outro as well. Like I did enjoy that, like, nice kind of like, fade out, and the track does eventually kind of just not cut out, but like, there's nothing really going on for like the last like, like couple seconds, and it like like if you aren't paying attention, you might want to check you might end up checking like, your device of choice and be like, wait, did the internet cut out for some reason? But yeah, I think with Efecto, like, this was the first true moment within the record that I kind of like, got a little annoyed by that reggaeton beat. But like outside of the beat though, like the performance from Bunny, I found to be pretty solid, and like specifically the moment where you hear him saying no, 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 like, the no's were pretty fun, pretty notable. Like I found that to be fun. And also, like, throughout the track, you get moments where, like, we get that solitude kind of feel. But yeah, I really don't have anything else to say about this track as a whole that you haven't already covered. Like, it's I want to say it's fine, but like, again, we're not really having a lot of meat on the bone for me to dive into 100%. So like, this is, again, like in the track rankings, I'm kind of putting this in the bottom half of the record, but nothing so offensive that I'm gonna instantly skip this track next time I hear it.
That's fair. That's fair. And I'm probably in the same boat with you too. Like, if I'm listening out front to back, I'm not skipping this, but am I going to seek it out as an individual song? Probably not.
So the next track here is Party, 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 Party. No, but yeah, with Party here, we get another collab artist here with Raul Alejandro. That's a fun name to say. But with Party, like, again, you get that reggaeton beat here, but like, through repeated listens, like, I didn't really mind it so much. But there's one thing that I will say that has the potential to grade on the listener, and that's a repetition of the chorus where they're saying the word party, 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 party. Like, I don't even know if that's 100% the word that's being said, but there's a word that's being, like, basically, like, sung to the listener over and over and over again. And if you want to know my feelings about, like, repetitious lyrics, ladies and gentlemen, scroll back a couple episodes, check out our Big Thief review, and specifically go to the section that we talk about Happy With You, and you'll find out how happy I am with that track. But I digress. So, but I will say, though, overall, though, outside of that chorus part, like, the performances from Bunny and Raul were pretty solid. Like, I did enjoy what was going on there. And also, like, the spoken word, like, studio moment thing that happened at the end of the track was pretty decent. So yeah, even though I did kind of critique the song for like having that repetitious, like, party, 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 it didn't do enough. It didn't grate on me so much that this is my bottom track off the whole record. But I will say, though, this might be like the only like cut track in terms of a bottom track. Catch Me on a Different Day, this could be like, my second least favorite track, but still, nonetheless, it's just a bottom half track for me.
We must be operating at some sort of wavelength, man, because I also had Happy With You in my notes about this song, because you mentioned how the repetition can be grating on a listener. Hi, hello, how you doing? My name's Matt, and I am a guest host on this show. Actually, I'm not a guest host, but you get the point. So yeah, there are a lot of elements to this song that I did not like. I did not like the repetitive chorus. I didn't like the fact that it once again brought back the beat, brought back the horn, even though it never left. And it just made the whole like fatigue feel a little flabby. Like, I thought like we're entering the flabby middle of this record with a song like this. But the other thing that sank it is once again the lyrics, which again I think if you go to a situation like we had earlier on the record with a song like Yo No Soy Celoso, where the music and the lyrics, like that would have made it interesting, but the fact that you have the boilerplate beat with lyrics that translate to English, go, I've made your pussy sentimental. Like, what the hell are you talking about, dude? Like, if he was playing it up like, hey, I'm the bad guy and this is my bad guy villain song, okay, fine. But the fact that he's even being the slightest bit serious and the slightest bit attempting to pass it off as real machismo, no. But ultimately, what did sink this song for me is that chorus, and how ironic that the most offensive part of this Spanish-speaking album is that one word, party, repeated in English over and over and over and over again, to the point where it's just like, nope, we're not doing this anymore. So, just like that, we have completed my bottom three with the rock at the bottom of the rocks with Party. My least favorite track off the whole album.
Oh man, and yeah, I totally appreciate and dig that, and I kind of had a feeling as I started doing my overview about the track as a whole that this had the potential to be your bottom track. So, and kudos for you for delivering such a nice dissection. Well, not a nice dissection, but like a thorough dissection about the track there. So, Matthew, I'm gonna kick the floor back over to you to end off side A of the record with the track Aguacero. There we go.
Yeah. And for the record, I'm pretty sure we're at the end of side B, and this is a double album, but I'm not going to dock you points for that. Just throwing that out there. So for Aguacero, once again, for the 9th or 10th time in as many tracks, it seems, we are once again bringing back the beat, and we are bringing back the horny. But here, the lyrics I mentioned on the last song felt a little too serious to be taken seriously, or the tone was too serious to be taken seriously. Here, it feels so weird and off-putting that it actually kind of works. So some of the lyrics that are on this album, when they are translated to English, some of them are good, some of them are not good. Like, one of the first lyrics on this album when translated to English is, "You're getting my dick anxious." Like, again, come on, dude. Like, why? Why are we going there? But, on the other hand, another cheesy line like, "If the heat is in the 90s, then the wetness is at 100." Like, that's a lyric that's so goofy, I'm willing to let it slide. Like, that's actually pretty charming and stupid. Like, to me, my overall thoughts on Aguacero, aside from the obvious, which is that it is obvious, is that there's too much solid on this track, like those weird lines, for me to completely dismiss it, but there's too much awkwardness in the lyrics and not enough musical standoutness to elevate it any higher. So to me, Aguacero is very very much an album track.
And for me, I kind of have mixed feelings about the track as a whole. Like, I wouldn't really call it an album track, but yeah, I'm gonna start with the performance from Bunny here. Like, here he does seem very focused, and also I do appreciate the quiet whisper sections that you get here from Bunny. So I felt that was pretty effective and solid. And ladies and gentlemen, we also get a moment here where the track does skip for a section, and also you get a full stop here. So I felt like that was pretty great. It's very much speaking to my palette and music as a whole. And the outro as a whole, it was pretty solid with the production kind of stripped back. And you kind of get the effect that Bunny's just running out of steam at the end of the track. So why do I consider this to be a bottom half kind of track kind of territory? It's for the pure fact that the lo-fi kind of swirls from the beat that you get there. I found that to be pretty distracting and like kind of meager, and that might have been the effect, considering like maybe we're winding down from the party at the end of the night, and like you're basically kind of like just running out of steam, as evident by the outro. But yeah, that was the only thing that kind of like prevented this, like kind of sank this track in appreciation value. But again, not so much that this is my bottom track, man.
It's interesting. I'm starting to get curious because we have made it through halfway through this album, and you have yet to reveal your singular bottom track, and I've already revealed my bottom three. So the possibility for 5 o'clock is still on the table. But yeah, I think Aguacero is definitely a track that it's getting a little further down below the, if I were listening to this album again, would I skip this track? I wouldn't, but it's testing the waters a little bit.
Yeah. But before we continue to test the waters of Un Verano Sin Ti by Bad Bunny himself, Matthew, I must pause the podcast and ask you a question, a pregunta, as like some people might call it.
Yes, and what is that pregunto that you are willing to ask me?
If the dear listener out there really does appreciate what you and I are bringing to the table with this episode here right now, and they want to help support what you and I do on a week in, week out basis, what are some ways that they can do such actions? And also, in addition to that, what are other ways that they can help connect with us?
Well, the ways they can help support us and what we do is by continuing to listen to Hey, Listen to This. And the way they can do that, first off, is by finding us on their favorite podcasting platform of choice. We are pretty much on all podcast platforms. We're on Apple Music, we're on Pocket Cast, we're on Spotify. If you want to listen to us on your drive to work, or while you're in the shower, or while you're doing your laundry, or while you're driving to work while doing your laundry, whatever the case may be, that is how you can listen to us there. You can also listen to us by going to our YouTube page. Don't give me that look. You can also listen to us by going to our YouTube page and finding episodes that we upload every week. And we post there, and if you are looking for us there, you can use YouTube Music or regular YouTube to listen to us there. And if you like what you hear, first of all, give us that 4 or 5 star rating. Give us that like, comment, and subscription. Whatever it does to take for you to help please the algorithmic gods of these sites. And secondly, if you are interested in sharing our content with somebody, but you're not sure who that somebody is, don't worry. We are also on social media as well. You can obviously post any link you like to any social media, but if you want to find us on social media, you can find us on Facebook, you can find us on Threads, you can find us on Instagram, you can find us on Blue Sky. And the username for any of those sites, aside from just plain old Hey, Listen to This, is ttheylisten. Again, that is ttheylisten. And if you're looking for us on YouTube, you can find us that way too. And speaking of ttheylisten, if you want to contact us directly, but you do not know us directly, we have an email account you can reach us at. That is ttheylisten@gmail.com. Again, that is ttheylisten@gmail.com. Again, if you want to give us some positive feedback, some critical feedback, or perhaps recommend a future episode, because we've done listener requests in the past and we'd love to do one again. Again, that is ttheylisten@gmail.com. And as always, to those who have done any and all of those things so far, thank you. As Ryan mentioned earlier, we're just 2 dudes in Pittsburgh. We're just sitting here talking. We're not sponsored by any major broadcast network, podcast network, or any type of major sponsorship. We're just 2 dudes who love talking about music. And Ryan, as always, I thank you for talking music with me on a week in, week out basis. It has been a fun ride, and one that is soon to be taking some familiar but adventurous turns.
Oh man, I'm excited to see where that's gonna lead us. And yeah, the same compliment goes back to you, dude. And I just looked back on my Instagram memories, and 2 years ago we did the Cure episode, man. So shout out to that episode where I basically kind of exploded on the screen. in a fun way. But oh man, but if ladies and gentlemen, if you're curious to know what Cure album that we did discuss, we went down the Disintegration route. It's one of our earlier reviews, so scroll back in our catalog. First of all, listen to the record. Second of all, check out the review and see what it sounds like, where I basically fall in love with the band. But I digress. That is not this review. This review is indeed just talking about Bad Bunny himself. And the way that we continue on with the rest of the review is we get into the back half of said album, with the next track being Enséñame, Bailar. And I'm going to kick this one off here with this track here. And I found this track here, like, the groups here are pretty solid. And the overall production, I actually kind of found to have a little bit of a twinkly, like, effect to it. Like, a little, like, shiny, like, star effect to it. Also, with Bunny himself, his voice is echoed in the track in those little moments, and I always appreciate the little moments like that, and I felt like that was a pretty good effect there. And like, the one critique that I do have about the track as a whole, like, because outside of that, Bunny's flow is pretty solid, it's pretty standard stuff, but the production has like almost like a lo-fi effect to it. And what I mean like lo-fi effect, like, dear listener out there, if you're on YouTube, or if you're not on YouTube, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, go on YouTube, type in lo-fi girl, and that's basically kind of like the beat that we're going for here. Like, very like stripped back, like, minimal stuff. And also, like, the one critique that I do have as a whole, though, outside of the production elements, is the production almost like gives way to Bunny in some instances. Like, it just basically kind of gets overpowered in certain spots. So, but yeah, like with Enséñame, Bailar, this is pretty much a bottom half track here. Like, you get some good performances, but some missteps in execution as a whole.
I'm probably a little higher on this track than you are with Enséñame, Bailar. First of all, we are bringing back the beat, but lyrically, we're not going for the horny. We are going for romance and seduction. And to be fair, the lyrics on this track definitely purvey more of a more innocent romance, or at least an attempt at innocent romance. Because instead of talking about, hey girl, let's get in bed, let's drink, let's do drugs. Here we're talking about stuff like footprints in the sand and wanting to see the sunset. Like, it's textbook romantic stuff, but it's good for a reason. It's cliche, but for good reason. It is funny to hear him calling wearing leather naughty in this track. Like, he's basically talking about, let's dance on the beach and, let's go out to the club and wear something naughty like some leather. Come on. What you were talking about earlier with, your dick being anxious, like, you can't get away with calling leather naughty now, man. I thought that was pretty funny. And vocally, I thought his performance was actually pretty good. He's going back to more of a crooner, more smooth R&B Lothario style, which I kind of prefer to the more toned down Drake type of mope rap at his most basic. And I thought the outro was pretty interesting. I did understand what you meant by the lo-fi effects. Like, it's sort of going for that, like, real, like, downbeat, off-key type of put this on the record player and hope it isn't completely clean type of vibe. Which I kind of appreciated, but I kind of understand why it feels a little off-putting. Overall, I'd probably put this track towards the middle. Not necessarily in the bottom half, but sort of around like the 7, 8, 9 territory. Maybe like 10.
And that's totally fair, man. And shout out to those who wear leather out there and are feeling pretty naughty about it. But I digress, man. Matthew, I say we just keep this gravy train rolling, this Caribbean fuse beach party going. And the way that we do that is we get into the next track, which is indeed entitled Ojitos Lindos.
Ojitos Lindos. And we get another guest this time, but this time instead of it being a solo guest vocalist, it is a full band. Because at first I thought it was just the name of the vocalist, but the whole band is called Bomba Estéreo, which they have been described as psychedelic cumbia. And I'm not 100% sure what that is. I can only tell you that on this track, it sounds really freaking good. Because first of all, Liliana Salme, who is the lead vocalist of Bomba Estéreo, has a wonderful singing voice, and the way that she sings the hook is fantastic. So immediately she takes the top spot in the guest vocalist department, like by a country mile. Once again, we bring back the beat. Once again, we bring back the romance. But what helps this track so much is the fact that with the full band behind Bad Bunny and company, you get the implementation of some really dreamy synth work, which really helps create the romantic ambiance of this track. And what really helps this track too is the fact that for almost the entirety, if not the whole entirety of this record so far, we've pretty much gotten the idea of romance from Bad Bunny's perspective and his perspective only, with the guest vocalist being there to merely echo that. Here you're getting more of a counter dialogue between Bad Bunny and Salme, and it works so well because it does sort of solidify and establish that this romance that he is seeking after is actually a two-way street, you know? He wants what he wants, and she knows what she wants. And the way it just comes together is so well. And I also really liked how this track lays low and breaks out musically in the correct places. Like when Bad Bunny goes for the upper register in the song, it makes the track stand out. So it has the low parts and the high parts, and it just works together so well. And the music video is right there too. Like it's a very nice, it almost reminds me of the better parts of Grease or your favorite teen romance movie of choice. Like this track knows exactly what it's doing, and it creates such a serene environment that I was taken away by it. So yeah, I really don't have anything else to say about Ojitos Lindos other than we have arrived at my favorite track off the entire album.
I'm so glad that you put this as like your favorite track off the whole record, because like a lot of the things that you mentioned, I share hand in hand with, like in terms of just the overall feel. Like one of the things that I enjoyed right out of the gate is just the collaboration, the dual element of like Bunny and the lead vocalist of Bomba Estéreo, Liliana Lisomute. Anyways, it's been a long day, man. But like the dual vocal elements, like they work so well. It sounds so pleasant to the ears. Like you do get that reggaeton beat coming back here, but I do enjoy what like the twist on it. Like it's slowed down and murky, so like that was pretty good. The trumpets in the background are pretty solid and murky as well. But like the overall feeling that I got from the track as a whole was like a very like kind of like a nice triumphant kind of like smooth kind of feeling. Like you get this synth lines throughout the track, whether like them doing the chords at the start or like just doing downbeat sections. Like everything's pretty good there, but admittedly though with Ojitos Lindos, this just barely got cut out of my top 3, and I originally had this in my top 3 at number 3, but there's a track coming up here relatively soon, spoiler alert, that like upon further review I was just like, nah man, this is shit. But full props to you for recognizing this as the king of the castle, man. It's a great track.
It is a great track. Again, I was just taken aback by the full band essence of it. And it's funny earlier when you mentioned this band or Bad Bunny style being indie pop, like I was kind of like, really? I don't know if indie rock's in his wheelhouse, but this track kind of proves that it is. Like, because this could very well be like an indie track song from a band like Tame Impala or hell, even Big Thief, honestly, if they're going in the direction they continue to go with. But as far as the direction we're continuing to go in, I will throw to you, Ryan, for the next track, which is 2016.
So, dear listener, at the beginning of this review, I kind of illustrated that Bad Bunny's flow was like kind of a mixture of like Post Malone and Drake. I don't know if you got this vibe with 2016, but the very beginning of it very much sounds like Drake with like Bunny doing the vocal inflections. And then, speaking of which, when the beat comes in, I'm willing to bet you, like, maybe $4 that this song here could pass off as a sister song to Hotline Bling. I don't know, like, I wouldn't be surprised if he got like inspired by that song. So, but as a whole, Hotline Bling is a pretty good song. So if you're gonna get inspired by any song like by Drake, that's a good song to be inspired by. But outside of the Drake comparisons, though, like the emotion from Bunny here is pretty solid. Again, if there's anything I could take away from this review, Bunny emotes pretty effectively, and that's always throughout his whole all the tracks here, and there's not really a track here where he just dials in a performance and kind of just doesn't really do his part to carry his load. The beat does have a little bit of a sinister effect to it, which is a nice little texture thing that it has going for it. And also we get another section here where the beat just stops for a second and then it just kicks back in. So that speaks to me, and I do appreciate how Bunny's been able to execute that element throughout various tracks here so far. But yeah, my overall feelings about 2016, this is going into the good song bucket. I appreciate it. If this were to come on within a shuffle kind of context of a playlist, I wouldn't skip it. It's a fine track.
I'm kind of right there with you. I would probably put this in the good song bucket. Before I continue with my thoughts, question. Was Hotline Bling off the album Views?
Correct, yes.
Okay, the reason I ask is because in the lyrics of 2016, it says right there, he's listening to Drake's Views. So I think you're absolutely right. I think he very much must have been hearing Hotline Bling and decided to make a song based off of that. Another part of this song, which is interesting, is the fact that we do bring back the horny, but we also bring back the trap beats. So that might be another focal point as to him trying to imitate Drake. And what makes this song interesting on one end is that the concept of it is basically, hey, remember back in 2016? Those were some good times. I thought you were hot then. And now that I have time to shoot my shot, I'm going to let you know to your face that I like you and I want you. And there is a bit of a goofy innocence to it, in a sense. I mean, it's not necessarily an innocence I would recommend as any type of romantic advice, but there are people out there that, get lonely and look at their old contacts and be like, oh yeah, you. Oh, you. Hey, you. And that is, in fact, the concept of human life that is interesting to put into a song. Unfortunately, this song doesn't quite sound as interesting as its concept goes, possibly because, again, it's trying to emulate Drake, so you kind of lose yourself there a little bit. But I agree that Hotline Bling is a pretty solid song, and so is this. So, 2016, it's all right.
Yeah. And I feel like we're basically kind of in agreement about the overall appreciation, and I can't get over the fact that I unintentionally called the Hotline Bling comparison. Again, I bet the listener out there who's listening to this episode right now to listen to 2016 and then listen to Hotline Bling, and you'll know what we're talking about, man. But I digress. We must progress into the next track here, which is El Apagón. And Matthew, the floor is yours.
The floor is mine. So, for an R&B album or a hip-hop album or any type of major pop album with urban influences, it's kind of amazing that we've gone this far on the record without a true rep by area type of song. Tupac did with California Love, or Fat Joe and Jadakiss did with New York. Something like that. So here we have El Apagón, where Bad Bunny and crew are repping Puerto Rico. And this song very much reminds me, you talked about how the last song reminded you of Drake. This song reminds me of Pitbull. And it feels like an old school Pitbull song, like Fireball, or the one where he goes, meet me at the hotel room. Not Timber, not that one. But it works like an old school Pitbull song, and I wholly mean that as a compliment, because this song just oozes sonic confidence. Like, it just goes so hard in the paint. Like, it just is unrelenting. The chorus itself is very direct. Again, very horny, but somehow it works. Like, it's just, like, instead of him trying to be smooth and everything, he's just saying, hey, I'm from Puerto Rico, that's cool, and I want to do you. That's cool too. Party. Dale. It's very, very direct, and the chanting chorus behind him just works so hard, and the beat too. Like, the beat is just, like, very, like, in your face, unrelenting, almost punishing in a sense of how, like, confident it sounds too. Like, it's very percussive. And honestly, this could have been my favorite song on the whole record, if not for the fact that it does go a little bit all over the place, which I didn't mind. I did not mind the fact that there were so many different, like, twists and turns of this song that just sort of went all over the place and just very much embraced its own chaos. But that did sink it just under Ojitos Lindos. So El Apagón for me gets the silver medal. We've completed my top three, and it lands in at number 2.
And for me, a lot of the things that you talked about with this track here, I agree with you 100%. You talk about, like, how this track kind of, like, oozes, like, confidence, and, like, it goes so hard in the paint. Yeah, dude, like, that's the thing I noticed coming out of the gate. Like, everything starts with such a stripped back, sinister beat to it, and the way that Bunny's rapping here, it matches that feel. Like, he's looking at you square in the eye and saying, hey, you fucked with me, I'm gonna fuck with you, I'm gonna fuck you up, bitch. Like, kind of like, that kind of, like, like that kind of confidence, man. It's like essentially Sidney Crosby going down on one knee, about to deliver a slap shot against a Philadelphia Flyers goaltender. I digress. So, but outside of the intro, the way that this track kind of, like, adds the element of, like, for lack of a better descriptor, I put sticks. Like, that was just such a great that was such a great touch on the percussive element. Like, that was so good. And honestly, dude, like, the track could have just rode that home, and I really would have appreciated it nonetheless. But then you get to switch up with the track getting more dubstep and techno elements. And that switch up hits so hard, and it's so good. Like, I very much did appreciate that, and I was taken away by that switch up, like, wholeheartedly. And the way the song shifts from there is great. You get the group shout that you talked about, where they're saying Puerto Rico, and how that essentially kind of just morphs into a female vocalist singing kind of like what I kind of described as a late night kind of club song, like a very solitude kind of, like, like Charlie XCX, like, hey, we stay too late at the club kind of song. So I felt like that was good. And I kind of share the same kind of sentiments with you that This song does kind of like, it starts out really great. You get that switch up that hits very hard. And then it kind of just shifts to a couple different modes. Not a bad thing, but it kind of does hold it back for being like my favorite track off the whole record. So, ladies and gentlemen, do you hear that sound? That is the sound of the Keurig being done making coffee because, like you, I have El Apagón as my second favorite track off the whole record.
There's really no other way to describe it other than it's just a solid, strong banger of a song. Like, this is the song that can get your butt out on the dance floor no matter what nationality you are, what country you come from. You just hear that beat and it's just like, let's go. Let's go right now. So yeah, it is an absolute knockout of a song. And as far as the concept of let's go and continuing on, we shall continue on because the next track off of Un Verano Sin Ti is Otro Atardecer. Ryan, the floor is now yours.
So with this track here, we get another collab element here. But it's kind of like, the previous collab that we had. The collab band that we have here is the Marias, and the lead vocalist here is Maria Zordora. Again, might be mispronouncing that, but it's okay. But yeah, the dual vocals from Bunny and the lead vocalist off of that band, they accompanied by a repetitive swirling beat was pretty much a nice kind of a nice groove, and I did appreciate that. And again, I pretty much got the Drake vibes here when Bunny comes in during his first verse. So again, for him to be listening to Drake around the time that he made this record, that checks out pretty much, and it does support my theory in my ears. I judge it wholeheartedly. The section that primarily featured the vocals from the Marias, like, that part was just so soothing to the ears. Like, that was just so nice, and I very much appreciate that. It was definitely a highlight for me, honestly. I will say, though, as a whole, the beat, for better or for worse, can get a bit weak for its own good. Like, the track would have benefited from just a wee bit of a stronger beat. And also within the track, you get a full stop moment in the track. Again, so good. Very much up my alley. But overall, though, we get a good song bucket kind of track here that could have easily been a cut track or a top 3 track, maybe, if it wasn't for the beat being so being a bit anemic for its own good. But it's a good track nonetheless.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat with you. In fact, I might be a little higher on this track, or at the very least higher on the beat. I didn't think it was spectacular, but I was taken aback by the fact that it was a traditional 4 on the floor dance beat in this economy. So yeah, that was a nice change. And I do wholeheartedly agree that the Maria's presence on this track is very nice, and they do a nice job providing the high soprano to the low baritone of Bad Bunny. I thought that was a nice compliment. Lyrically, we're bringing back the romance with a little bit of that beat and a little bit of horny. But at the same time, this plunges a little bit more towards romantic, where he's talking about things like, actually all 3 of them are talking about how, they don't need to find a sunset in order to capture that romantic moment. And I thought, that is really nice. Like, that is one of those moments where it's just like, oh yeah, who cares about the typical cliches? Let's just find a place to be romantic because we want romance. And that's, it was a nice breath of fresh air. So yeah, I'd probably put this song in the top half of the album for me pretty solidly. It doesn't do it quite enough to enter cut track territory, but I would say it's definitely the top half, probably around a 6, 7, 8, 9 territory.
And I respect that. And maybe upon further listens, if I grew more accustomed to that beat, and it might be I might be right there with you. But Matthew, The next track is not Dos Cocos. It is indeed Un Coco.
It is Un Coco. Very, very well played. So here we bring back the beat wholeheartedly, and this time we're going to light up a joint while we're doing that. Because here we get a bit of a different vibe from Bad Bunny overall. You do get a little bit of the lo-fi tonnage that you were talking about before, which I honestly thought was kind of a smart move to sort of complement the lyrics as a whole. Because basically, solidly speaking, I'm not going to get into the lyrics themselves directly, but this whole song is about how Bad Bunny is regretting love that he lost, and he is trying to smoke out the memories. He is trying to get as high as he possibly can so that he doesn't have to feel the pain of the breakup. Which, again, not a terrible concept for a song. I thought it was solid, and I think adding that guitar makes for a nice sort of vibe of, hey, we're going to get really high right now, and this is kind of what being high sounds like. This is your brain on drugs. This is your guitar on weed. So I thought it was a nice effect, but that's kind of all I have to say about that. Otherwise, you kind of get what you're getting with the track once you understand what it's about, and it's a solid track. I don't know if I'd go as far as putting it in the good song bucket, but it's definitely not a bottom track by any means at all.
And for me, it's interesting that you illustrated that this was like a, hey, let's light up a joint, and like, you know, this is what happens when your guitar is high. This is what happens when you are high. Because you know what kind of reminded, like, you know, I was reminded of with that guitar part, especially at the beginning.
What was that?
I was reminded of a band that we covered, like, you know, not too long ago with Radiohead. Like with a little bit of like their later works, like, you know, like maybe like In Rainbows kind of territory. I don't know. I might be stretching that a little bit, but that was just the comparison that I took from it. So right away, like, you know, I'm pretty much hooked. Not hooked, but like I very much like, you know, enjoying the track coming out of the gate. And one moment that I do want to highlight within the track that made me appreciate it maybe a little bit more than you is the way that Bunny's vocals just fall, like cascade in certain spots. Like that was pretty good, very good, very pleasant on the ears. And also, you get a skip moment here where the track just basically cuts out the production for a second, then comes back in. So very much good, very much up my alley. And also later on in the track where the guitar part comes back in was pretty solid, and it becomes more on forefront. So yeah, I feel like overall though, like while I kind of share the same, like, you know, like overall thoughts and feelings about like, yeah, this track you get what you get. I feel like I'm a little bit higher on what we are getting here. And that might be just because of, like, you know, the Radiohead comparison that I kind of drew from it, and like the other moments that are just basically more me-coded. But I think we're both in agreement that this track isn't bad. It's pretty much like, you know, the good song bucket with the potential for me to be in a top half kind of territory.
I can respect that. Yeah, this would probably be more towards the middle, maybe the bottom part of the middle, like maybe like 13, 14 territory. So it's not a bad track by any means, but it just didn't do enough to like elevate itself for me. But I can understand where you're coming from, because it does have some interesting moments, and it does have some like very sort of hiccupy type of production that lends itself to the overall vibe of Un Coco. But we get off of Un Coco, we put out the joint, and we move on to the next track, which is Andrea. And Ryan, the floor is yours.
All right. So with Andrea here, we get a collab band here, and that band is Buscabla. Again, like, you know, forgive me, Lord, for I've sinned. But yeah, the overall track as a whole, like, I'm going to start with the positives. The flow from Bunny coming after that first chorus is pretty tight. And just the overall flow from Bunny as a complete package, like, he's pretty locked in. But dude, like, do you know that effect when you're watching a movie trailer and like they're trying to go for like a dramatic moment where they slow down like a well-known song and you have that female vocalist singing like I can feel it coming in the air tonight, like a well-known song, and you're like, oh, come on, I've heard this one before.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and that's a problem. That's a problem.
Yeah, very much so. And here's the reality of it, Andrea here with this track here. That vocal, that feature coming from them, it's so weak. It's very weak. I'd rather listen to movie trailer garbage compared to this. So, it basically kind of deflates any momentum, any potential that this track could have. And yeah, like the just like that's like the beat also during the chorus is pretty weak. It's pretty empty. Like, you have Bunny trying his best and trying to deliver like, a very focused and like, emotional and very technically sound like, performance. But then you have like basically him walking on nothing. Like, not even clouds, because clouds have substance. Like, this is basically just an empty void. So, yeah, just that basically drags the song down as a complete package. So, I mean, I don't need to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. We finally hit rock bottom here with Andrea being my least favorite song off the whole record.
Before I go into my thoughts about Andrea, it is very funny to me how my least favorite track was Party and your least favorite track was Andrea. Two of, I think, only 3 or 4 English titles on this track. So, Viva la Puerto Rico. But aside from that, I'm a little higher on Andrea than you are. Not super higher. Like, this is not a top half track for me. But I will give it its flowers. I didn't think the vocal performance was that bad from the guest. At least I would rather listen to this than movie trailer garbage, because here there's enough ambiguity where it's just like, I wonder what they're talking about. Where if someone's covering In the Air Tonight like it's this Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, I know exactly what they're doing and they can screw off. But aside from that, lyrically, this might be the darkest song on the whole album, because this Andrea that Bad Bunny and company are referring to, I cannot tell if this is a villain of a woman or if she is a hero to be celebrated, or if she's sort of like a Harley Quinn type, or some fugitive that's to be respected, or I don't know. It's very confusing because it all feels very like, it's almost like you took an ID documentary and turned it into a 5-minute hip hop R&B song. And it comes complete with like the horror screams and the downplaying of the synths, and everything's very downbeat and dark and confused. That's the one word I would probably take away from the song, is confused. Like, it's unsure of what it wants to be. I mean, it sounds, I will give it credit for sounding confusing and sort of creating this illusion of we're not sure what's going on here, but we know it's dark. So at least I think they understood the assignment. I'm just not sure if they completely embedded the source material. They went more Ben Affleck than Daniel Day-Lewis in a sense. But all that to say, this track's okay. Like, it's a little closer to album track territory for me. I just thought it was a little too dark to be fully appreciated, but I appreciate the attempt.
Yeah. Also, I'm gonna save the comparison. They went full Ben Affleck instead of going Daniel Day-Lewis. I'm gonna steal that for the future, man. So props to you for coming up with like a clever thing there. So
you're welcome.
Yeah. Without any further ado, the next track is Me Fui de Vacaciones. The Matthew the Floor is first.
So with Me Fui de Vacaciones, this is an interesting track because it almost feels like it's as simple as the title gives, which is, vacaciones. Bad Bunny's going on vacation and he wants to tell you about it. And the production on this track, the instrumentation does create a somewhat cliche but understood cliche of beach vibes with that sort of very tight strum guitar that's almost creating like a reggae beat, and the steel drums that are like, hey, welcome to the beach. So yeah, that's appreciated. And I think what also helps is the fact that Bad Bunny again is trying to be self-aware. Like, he knows, like, he's living up this life of being on vacation and partying it up and getting laid every night. But he's sort of aware as to how rich it is, and it sort of tries to play that down. So that was ultimately appreciated too. But that being said, it definitely doesn't mesh well with what we just dealt with Andrea. Like, it's definitely a lot of sonic whiplash. So all that to say is, I think this track's okay. Probably an outside contender for the good song bucket. Might make it there just on nicety vibes, but ultimately probably like way down the middle of the road for me. Like, it's a solid album track for me.
And I feel like with me, considering that I did not enjoy the sonic vibes of Andrea like at all, like 100%. Like the whiplash effect here for me, like it might have like maybe altered my view of the track as a whole. So getting into the nooks and crannies of it just a little bit here, like you talk about the islandy kind of like beach vibes here, like you get a steel drum inclusion here with the track, and I felt like that was a nice touch. Like, first time we're hearing a steel drum throughout the whole record, and it's the only time we're gonna hear a steel drum, so like pretty good. And also one thing I did enjoy within the track is the bass itself, and like you also get the spots where Bunny raps against it, and those sections were pretty tight. So again, pretty solid, very effective. And throughout the track we've talked about like that reggaeton beat, but here you get very much just a pure reggae beat, which is going on here. And it's a nice change of pace. I very much appreciate what it was going for there. And you get the inclusion of the lo-fi elements here in the outro, but I did enjoy what that brought to the table. Like, I thought it was pretty fun with that lo-fi guitar line leading off the track. So, I feel like overall, though, walking away from this track, I feel like I'm a little bit higher on you. Well, not so much that we're ending in, like, top half territory. Like, this is definitely good song bucket territory, but maybe, like, the tippity top of the good song bucket territory for me.
I can understand that. I'd probably say it's sort of teetering in that will it, won't it section of the good song bucket. So, yeah, Mi Fui de Vacaciones, one of those songs that, again, if it was on shuffle or on a random playlist, definitely not a skip. It sounds good enough. Now, will we think this of the next track? Let's find out. Because the next track is the title track, which is Un Verano Sin Ti. Ryan, floor is yours.
Okay, so with the title track here, I don't have a lot of notes here because compared to the rest of the tracks here, outside of the very next track coming after it, this is like one of the shortest tracks off the whole record. But what we get here within the short track is a pretty impactful kind of song. Like, I talk about Bunny's ability to emote in his music, and here you get that through and through. It's pretty great, his emotion he's able to, the performance he puts on, and the flow again is pretty solid. I have no critiques about his performance throughout this whole record, and this is a highlight for me throughout the whole record. And on the production end, you get big synth chords and you get swells throughout the track. So I thought that was pretty effective. Yeah, and it's a pretty short song but still pretty impactful, and I do enjoy what was going on there. But yeah, only other thing I gotta say about Un Verano Sin Ti is that it kind of landed in a top half kind of territory for me. Not so much that we're in a cut track territory, but it stood outside of the good song bucket for one reason or another.
I'm probably a little higher on this song than you are. I'll probably put it in the good song bucket because I do wholeheartedly agree that Bad Bunny's performance on this track is very good. It's very much just him and some very stripped down production. So it almost feels like an a cappella tune, if anything. And that's a good thing because this track deserves a cappella. Because lyrically speaking, this is Bad Bunny realizing that everything he has sought after is lost. He realizes that everything is a mirage and he is trying so hard to find again. You know, he sees what he lost and who he lost in public and wants to get it back, but he knows he can't. Like, this track, like, if you look at the lyrics, this is probably the most fascinating or one of the most fascinating tracks on the entire album. So I would probably say it's easily top half good song bucket territory for me. Didn't quite do enough, like, because again, as much as I appreciate the acapella sort of very lost vibes of it, I couldn't put this above the likes of the Puerto Rico track or Ojitos Lindos. I just couldn't do it because again, while I appreciate this track for very much being much different from what we've gotten on this album so far, it didn't quite elevate itself that much. But I think I'm a little higher on it than you are.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and that's fair. Maybe catch me on a different day. This could be like a cut track territory, and I think like at one point through my last listen through the record, I kind of did have this as a cut track, but it got kind of like, booted out for one reason or another. But we are not going to get booted out of this review because we are keeping this gravy train rolling, and the way that we do that is we get to the penultimate track on the record, which is Agosto. Matthew, the floor is yours.
Thank you. We have reached the penultimate track of 23, and that is Agosto. And once again, we are bringing back the horny, but this beat does feel slightly different than usual. I'm not quite sure how, but it definitely isn't the same reggaeton beat that we've gotten through. Honestly, the majority of it being on the first half of this record. It's definitely switched up a lot more in the second half, but the beat does feel slightly different than what you would expect. And other than that, the only other note I have about Agosto is, much like the first half of the album, you get the usual suspects of the subject department, which is backed by a very solid singing performance. I will say that Bad Bunny does sing very well on this track. But lyrically, you know what to expect. He's talking about sex, he's talking about the beach, he's talking about the possibility of love, and he's talking about the guarantee of a good time. Which, sequentially speaking, coming after Un Verano Sin Ti is kind of nice in a sense, because it kind of is sort of, hey, pick yourself back up off your feet and remind yourself of who you are, you very, very confused, sexed up man. So I could appreciate Agosto for what it is, but not to the point where I'd probably put it any higher than like lower middle of the album.
So, and with me, with Agosto, again, Bunny's flow is pretty tight, and you really get the emotional feel from him in this track here. So again, basically copy and paste what I've said throughout this whole review here so far, because Bunny does do a good job on the performance front, and on the production front, you get the bass, which is pretty tight. But like overall though, what kind of holds this track back is like the lo-fi elements of the production kind of take away from the impact of that bass. So like, this could have been like a top half track territory for me, but it's a good song bucket territory though, honestly. One thing that I did note though is like how you get that ocean effect outro and how it basically leads into the final track, which is a good transition point for me. And I'm just gonna go ahead and just move into that transition point because in the spirit of the album, why not? And the final track here is Callaíta, which again, I've tried throughout this whole review here. So, anyways, with the final track here, we get the final collab within the whole record. And That is coming from the artist Tani. And yeah, not really. I'm gonna be honest with you. Up until really just kind of just fact checking myself on Wikipedia, I kind of forgot that there was a guest collaborator on here. So that probably takes away from the overall impact of said guest collaborator because they're basically invisible. But anyways, getting into the nuts and bolts about the track here. Again, performance from Bad Bunny is pretty great. And you get kind of a different kind of take on the reggaeton beat, which is pretty good, pretty solid. And just overall, though, with the outro where things become more sincere and like spacious, was a good choice considering the context of this being the final track off the whole record. But yeah, dude, I don't really have much else to say about it, and that might be due to the fact that we've gone to the end of the record here in terms of like listening, and I was just like, yeah, this track's fine.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you. I do have a little bit to add, though, with Callaíta. First of all, when I was looking through this on the YouTube playlist, guess how many views this has on YouTube as of maybe a day ago?
2 billion.
Not far off, 1.2 billion, which I saw that and I was like, oh, okay. And then I looked at the whole playlist and like, oh, I've seen the letter B come up a few times. So regardless of our views, this album is very, very successful, and we should be in awe of that on its own presence. And to be fair, I can understand why this track has 1.2 billion views. That is a very infectious hook going on in the song. Like, I thought the hook was very much pop ready and made for the radio, even if it's in Spanish. One more time, we're bringing back the beat, we're bringing back the horny. And in this context, it is in the way of saying that this pursuant of Bad Bunny's desires or Bad Bunny's object of affection is kind of in the category of she's the quiet type, but get her in the right mood, and she is a party girl, she's a freak, and she loves to be on the beach. And, again, not a terrible concept for a song, and Bad Bunny does sing well here. And I thought the guest vocalist, even though I thought, like you, was kind of not super significant, I did like it. It sounded all right. So, yeah, Callaíta is a solid track, and it deserves its flowers from the market at large for being a very successful song.
That being said, Matthew, we definitely deserve our flowers because, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't noticed, we had 23 tracks up. 23 tracks have been smacked down. Scorecards have been completely filled out. So there's only one thing left to say about this review.
We did it.
We did it, man. We experienced what it felt like to have a Sunday without you, as told by Bad Bunny himself. So I'm gonna go first in terms of my overall thoughts and rating about said album. So with Un Verano Sin Ti and Bad Bunny himself, like the complete package that we're getting here, again, this is a beefer of an album, probably like one of the beefiest albums that we've ever covered here on the show. And like honestly, like overall though, this album is not made for me, but I was able to find plenty enough examples within the album as a whole that I really just enjoyed 100%. Like my favorite track off the whole record, with that being Después de la Playa, like I can easily add that to a playlist. And you get excellent performances with Tití Me Preguntó, and also Un Verano Sin Ti, Apagón. And one thing that I took away from the whole record as a whole is Bad Bunny is an effective vocalist, rapper. He emotes pretty well. And also you do get some missteps in production, missteps in execution. And I mean, with a track list like this, like with 23 tracks, you're gonna have a dud, in my opinion. At least one dud, and that was Andrea. I appreciate, I know what he was going for. it was a misstep in execution. But overall, though, I'm walking away from the album with the overall sense of like, wow. On one hand, if someone were to come to me and say, "Hey, what's a Bad Bunny album that you would recommend, or a Latin album that you would recommend within the style of like Latin trap, reggaeton, like like kind of the fuse that he was going for here?" I would direct people to this album. But for me, am I gonna revisit this album at the end of the day? Probably not. Like, it's not my style. It didn't really hook me. It didn't really convince me to, like, revisit it outside of a couple tracks. So, overall, though, I'm giving Un Verano Sin Ti by Bad Bunny himself a decent 6.5 out of 10.
And for me, it's funny. I listened to this album a couple times, and I'm still kind of wondering why Bad Bunny is going to be the Super Bowl halftime show participant. Because on the one hand, I do like a lot of the stuff on here, and I think it's very solid stuff. And I think the one main thing I take away from this album is consistency. A lot of this album is very consistent. It has consistent beat, it has consistent theme, it has consistent performances. It does vary a little bit at times with the likes of the full band effort on Después de la Playa or Ojitos Lindos. Does take some missteps with Party and a couple others. It's funny you mentioned earlier the Wiz Khalifa album, Cushion Orange Juice, because that's kind of what this reminded me of overall. Is at its lowest or at its most meaningless, this is an album you could put on the turntable or CD player or aux cord at a party. Just let the beats do the job. You just vibe out to this album and have a good time. And there's really not a whole lot of moments where it forces you to pay attention to how bad it is, except for, again, the chorus on Party. So yeah, I thought this album was pretty solid, and I'm going to grade a little bit on a curve here because I'm kind of in the same boat where I don't think this album is for me, and I don't think I'm going to revisit it again. But I appreciate it enough that I'm going to go one small step higher than you and give Un Verano Sin Ti a 7 out of 10.
So that makes our average score to be a 6.75 out of 10 because
math
works for everyone. It's just numbers. Get over it, bitch. So for me, my next album recommendation, I'm gonna keep this easy. I'm gonna keep it simple. I'm gonna just recommend people just check out the only other Bad Bunny album that I've listened to in my lifetime, and that would be Debir Terir Mas Fotos, his album that he released last year. I haven't really revisited it since listening to it. Like last year, and I might check it out in the near future. But if you're looking for more Bad Bunny, that's a solid album to check out.
And for me, there were a couple directions I considered with this album in particular, as far as my album recommendation. I thought about recommending Cushion Orange Juice, as I just mentioned, but I'm going to go with an album I mentioned earlier, which is the only other non-English album we've talked about, and that is Pink Tape by FX. So if you're listening to this album and you're thinking, okay, this might be for me, this might not be for me, what foreign language album would be for me, I would recommend Pink Tape, because that was a solid mix of pop, R&B, a little bit of old school R&B, and it had enough twists and turns that it was fascinating and enjoyable in its own right. So Pink Tape will be my next recommendation.
So, ladies and gentlemen, to summarize, our average score was a 6.75 out of 10. Matthew recommended, in terms of a next album recommendation, if you've enjoyed Un Verano Sin Ti by Bad Bunny, or if you're just looking for something different, check out FX's Pink Tape. And I recommended the next album, the album that Bad Bunny released last year, which was Debir Terir Mas Fotos by the same artist. So, yeah, we did it, man.
We did it. That was, like you said, that was a beefer. That was a beefer of an album, and I'm glad we went through it. And I'm glad you suggested this, man, because, again, I would say it was a challenge for both of us, but it was also a very topical challenge with the Super Bowl halftime show coming up. So I'm glad that we got this sort of self-immersed introduction into the works of Bad Bunny.
Me too, man. Me too. And yeah, it's gonna be curious to see how that halftime show goes. And at the very least, we can watch the halftime show and be like, hey, I know that one. So yeah, that being said though, Matthew, before we officially shovel this review into bed, we must discuss one more thing. And that's basically, hey, where are we going next in our musical journey, man?
So this review is going to be our final review of January, the one we just completed with Bad Bunny and Un Verano Sin Ti. So next review will be in February, and much like we did last year, we are going to be delving into our, as Ryan calls them, our DEI initiatives, and we're going to be discussing some albums that follow the theme of Black History Month, which I'm excited about because last year we had a great time talking about some of the artists we covered, Sly Stone, Miles Davis, East Toomer, and for the first review of this year's Black History Month, Ryan, I'm going to have you choose between two cities, and these are the cities where these albums were recorded. Are you ready?
I am 100% ready, man.
All right. Your options are Philadelphia or Los Angeles.
Oh. As much as I'm curious about Philadelphia, I'm more excited about the possibility of going to Los Angeles. And also, my t-shirt is... It states, my heart lives in Los Angeles. So I must pick Los Angeles, man.
You know what? No regrets, because in either case, we're going to be talking about a great album, but you chose Los Angeles. So we're going to be talking about an album that was recorded mostly or partially in Los Angeles, partially in New York as well. But the artist in which it was recorded hails from Detroit. And so the album we're going to be talking about for our first Black History Month episode is from 1973, and is the album entitled Inner Visions by Stevie Wonder.
Ladies and gentlemen, Stevie Wonder has indeed entered the chat. Let's fucking go.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this one, man. It's gonna be a good one.
Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen out there, if you've not listened to Interventions by Stevie Wonder, make sure you check out that album before next week's review. That way you can have opinions about the album. And then you can also have opinions about the opinions that me and Matt are going to be bringing to the table. But yeah, man, only thing I got to say to you before we close it out, thank you for, doing this review here with me. I know, we stepped out of our comfort zone, and, honestly, I got to say this about you being a guest host with me on Hey Listen to This as a whole. Tu a mí me gusta más que el dinero.
Likewise, I think.